I want to thank my good friend in Seattle, Vonnie Turner, for putting this PowerPoint together for us tonight. She does an excellent job. A lot of this information tonight is really new. It has an esoteric undercurrent, a foundation of esoteric wisdom teachings. I think the listing that we gave from the society, George, can you get that purple paper there and violet paper? Thank you. Listed it as esoteric insights into the coming new age. This is really the bulk of what we're going to talk about tonight. Connections between ancient history and new science and the influence of the seven rays and the fires of initiation. I, like many of you, was totally mesmerized by the Notre Dame fire, which occurred around, I think it was April 15th, 16th. And when I first saw it on TV, I began to have what are called fire experiences. And many people who are esoteric have fire experiences. The numbers are growing. The fire seems to enter, it's a very pleasant feeling, through the top of the head and then all the way down the body to the very soles of our feet. And I had an experience like this. And I knew, as I saw the cathedral burning, that there was a very profound and significant story to be told about the fires burning at the Notre Dame Cathedral, because it fulfills a prophecy that I have been aware of for many years. We'll talk about that tonight in some detail. But fire religions have always existed throughout the world. The sun is explained as a ball of fire. It's much more than that. We'll close with a very spiritual and esoteric explanation of the three fires that Alice Bailey, a powerful mystic of the 20th century, an esotericist, explains three fires, which she describes as fire by friction, solar fire, and electric fire. But this fire in this church, for me, as I said earlier, it had a significance. And I knew as I saw it that a prophecy, part of a prophecy, was being fulfilled. And the prophecy says, an ancient prophecy, that when great cathedrals and temples dedicated to the esoteric are consumed by fire, that avatars are born into the world. Avatar is a great teacher. It could be a Buddha, it could be a Christ, it could be the reappearance that has been promised of the ascended masters who, beginning around 2025, that's only 6 years from now, will begin to externalize in the world. I believe they already have. But it'll become more broadly known. The fact that this fire took place in Europe is significant because the prophecy said that as we enter this new Renaissance period beginning in 2025, that these masters would reappear. They will influence the world. It won't be just them, but they're also, and some say it's already happening. I believe it is. We'll talk about that a little further into the lecture. Of angelic forces that are beginning to materialize or externalize in the world. We see evidence of that in things like crop circles. Anyway, the structure was unique, and I knew I knew that there were things about this fire that were going to happen that were going to be very significant. I thought that if the fire, this immense fire, had significance, then it would mean that the stained glass windows would somehow survive. Angelic forces, it is said, will use the stained glass windows and the reflection of light through the stained glass for healing. And we'll talk about colors tonight. We'll talk about healing. We'll talk about the 7 rays, which is an integral part of the coming age of Aquarius. A new psychology is evolving in the world out of the 7 rays. And when psychology becomes an exact science, it will be the psychology of the 7 rays. And what the 7 rays affords us, we'll pass out these the handouts I have on the rays toward the end of the meeting. But it gives us a more exact psychology. As I said before in other lectures, that when psychology becomes an exact science, it will be esoteric psychology. That's what it'll be. It will be accompanied by esoteric astrology, which in its purest form points the direction to the soul and its purpose based on the ascendant. That the significance in the new astrology is not based on your sun sign, that simply tells you your personality, but that the rising sign and the energies of that sign will point the direction to the soul's purpose. This in and of itself is an entire lecture that could go on for days. We have, in an appallingly short period of time this evening, I have the responsibility of trying to make sense out of very abstruse truths, ideas, esoteric concepts, secret, hidden, and known only to a few. That's what esoteric means. But occult means the same thing, so don't be offended by the word occult. Blavatsky used it profusely in her lectures. Her lectures were in the language primarily of Sanskrit and also the science of the 19th century. I live in the 21st century, as do you, and we are moving into very rapidly, too, I must say, into the Aquarian age. And so we see here by these wonderful pictures that my fellow student, Claregate student in England, who now lives in Seattle, Bonnie Turner. The cathedral's construction was begun in 1160 and was largely complete by 1260. In the 1790s, Notre Dame suffered desecration during the French Revolution, and much of its religious imagery was damaged or destroyed. But you can see how beautiful it is, and one of the things they were concerned about as the fire was burning was how would they ever replace these beautiful wooden spires. These oak trees that these were built out of don't even exist because they had immense oak trees. And they've all been chopped down and cut up and built boats and fought wars and used it in these cathedrals. Extraordinary stuff. And the craftsmanship that went into it, we'll talk about that a little later in the lecture, doesn't exist, no longer exists. And as I was watching the fire, and they were talking about, the dilemma of rebuilding this, I had envisioned the roof being replaced by a glass roof and a glass spire in the flavor of the architect I.M. Pei, who did the glass pyramid at the Louvre. We'll show some images of that shortly. But one of the things that really was significant was probably one of the most beautiful stained glass windows in the world is in Notre Dame. And it survived. It survived. How did it survive? Well, we have to go back in time and we have to look at the esoteric teachings. Primarily, what comes to mind for me is C.W. Leadbeater, the great Theosophical clairvoyant, who said in the 1920s, he said that he was able to see 700 years into the future. And he saw St. Paul's Cathedral. And one of the Mahatmas who was instrumental in the founding of the Theosophical Society was teaching at St. Paul's Cathedral. Well, nobody thought too much of it at the time, but they began to think about it a whole lot during World War II when London was being firebombed, and people were wondering if his predictions were accurate, because they were always accurate. How would the cathedral, St. Paul's, another one of the great cathedrals of the world, it really is extraordinary, how would it survive? And it did survive. And the land around it was completely destroyed. I think there were one or two small of these fire bombs that they weren't very big. They're kind of like fusees. If you know what a railroad fusee is, they used to light them when I was a kid at 4th of July. And they had red ones and green ones. And the police put them out when there's an accident, a fusee. And they were dropping these out of, well, at first they did it out of blimps in World War I, and then they did it from the airplanes in World War II, or something similar to that, to burn London. Again, fire. And out of the fire, London, the East End, which was a horrible, terrible area, people had wondered for years, how would you ever clean that up? And the Germans bombed it and cleaned it up for the English. They destroyed it and it was rebuilt. It's funny how in life a lot of times we think bad things are simply that, they're bad things, but a lot of times good things come out of bad things, bad events. I remember when I was young, I was 20 years old, and I went to Vietnam, and I ran into my old drill sergeant from Fort Lewis, Washington, and he was happy to see me, and I was happy to see him, and he was going to get my orders changed for me, because I had been assigned to a different unit than he was in. And he went in to see the captain that ran the replacement depot and tried to get Zimmerman's records changed and assignment changed. And the captain wouldn't give in. And of course, I was despondent, because I thought, man, here's the old drill sergeant. You know, he'd been through Vietnam twice before and survived, and this was my ticket to survive the war. And I got sent to a company who 2 weeks earlier had been wiped out for about the second or third time, and things didn't look too good. And 10 months later, my old drill sergeant, who was in Bravo Company, 2nd of the 35th, was wiped out. 10 guys survived, and he was killed, and he wanted me to be his RTO. That was the guy that was standing right beside him through thick and thin. So something that was bad turned out good. And this fire, which many people believe, or believed at the time, and still do believe, is a bad thing, may in fact be a sign. I believe it is a sign of something very good that's coming. And what is good, if the predictions of Leadbeater are correct, his prediction of St. Paul's Cathedral survived the war unscathed while everything around it was destroyed, because angelic forces protected St. Paul's Cathedral, and they protected Notre Dame in the same way. They used these windows, angelic forces, healing devas, and the light that shines through them is an energy that's related to the rays that heals. And if you're a healer and you're a person who's interested in things like esoteric healing, then you know that color, sound, vibration, these things, the frequencies, they can heal. You can heal people with it. You can heal people by visualization. Energy follows thought. I know people that have healed themselves from cancer. They visualize the cancer cells exploding. Energy follows thought, and the cancer explodes. I have friends in England who are part of the ashram that I belong to, who've healed themselves, miraculous healings. The doctors are just flabbergasted. I had 2 sisters that healed themselves from advanced leukemia and breast cancer. Not so much through visualization, but through things as simple as completely changing their diets, through changing from an acidic diet to what's it called, the alkaline diet. And the blood changes and becomes more alkaline. Cancer can't grow in an alkaline system. So there are a lot of new things that are sweeping the world, and the old established ways of the Piscean age are dying off. The assault on Christianity and the karma of the Catholic Church immediately comes to mind. You don't always think of it, but it's true. When you think of things like the Inquisition and the horrors of the Inquisition, and how even there in France the Huguenots and others, the Huguenots, were crucified and killed. Maybe 100,000 or more were killed. And it gives one pause. You think of the Kennedy family, who famously were allied with the Catholic Church, and the karma of the Kennedy family, and how their karma may have been a bloody, violent karma that they suffered from as a group of reincarnated Roman Caesars who incarnated into a powerful American family, suffered immense violence. May not have played itself out yet. We don't know. We think it's pretty close. We did a video that I produced in England on esoteric astrology and the horoscope of John F. Kennedy Jr. I think we showed it here one time. Where's Gary? Did we show it here, Gary, or not? We didn't show it on a Friday night, but we should. We should also have a weekend seminar on esoteric psychology and another weekend seminar on esoteric astrology. It's not enough time, but it will lay groundwork for us that will broaden our understanding, and it will stimulate, because these teachings are products of higher manas, higher mental plane energies, and it will stimulate neurons in the brain that are dormant, and it will activate them, and will help maintain the patency of the cranial sutures and fend off dementia and the ravages of things like arterial sclerosis. Anyway, the windows survived. I sensed that it would. But there's the fire, and it was an immense fire, and it burned tremendous heat, and yet the relics of this fire on April 15th, which is not very long ago, were able to survive, and I believe that there were angelic forces. You have to remember that Notre Dame is the greatest Catholic repository, church or cathedral outside of St. Peter's in Rome. It's Notre Dame. It has an immense history, both good and bad. Joan of Arc was burned out in front at the stake. A lot of things happened there, and it has a tremendous history. And now it's having to be rebuilt. It's interesting that here we are in Detroit, and Detroit is a French word, de toi, and it means resurrection, the phoenix being rebuilt, something built anew. Out of the old comes the new. Detroit. Detroit. The phoenix being rebuilt. And I went down in Detroit five days ago and was flabbergasted by the construction that's going on in Detroit. It may still be the murder capital of America. But there's immense new construction and the remodeling and rebuilding of old structures. Wait till they get done with the train station down at, Dearborn, right off of Michigan Avenue there. What? Yeah, just on the other side of Corktown, or in the Corktown area, Ford Motor Company. Fabulous building. And they're just going, they probably spent $10 or $15 million just on windows. Just on the windows. Think of that. It's a fabulous building, and it's going to be a center for Ford Motor Company. Again, resurrection. The resurrection of a building in the future. 1,000 years from now, they will revere the buildings of our time right now. They will revere them. And older buildings, homes that have survived. That will have an important meaning for people 500, 1,000 years from now, when the age of Aquarius is in fully energized. So we need to think about these things. But I was concerned about this fire and the windows surviving, and that how would it be rebuilt, because the trees that were used, as I said earlier, don't exist, and they'll have to come with some other construction. And I immediately thought of the architect I.M. Pei, who built the glass pyramid there at the Louvre. Shocked a lot of people. Has been assimilated into the consciousness of the people of the world, especially who go there and see it. And I had envisioned that this roof and the spires would be built in glass and would have a crystalline kind of a feature where the sunlight would be able to enter the church. The old churches were dark and they were dank and pretty gloomy places. There we can see some of the destruction of the roof collapsing, and yet the altar there of the Pietà of the Virgin Mary and the dying Jesus, and there the cross of Christ had survived. What a miraculous event. See, you can't take this too lightly. And especially if you're an esoteric guy like I am, you see meaning in things. And as your consciousness expands and you construct through reading the esoteric classics, through meditation, which we should all do, and we should all read the esoteric classics, and you keep a spiritual diary, which Theosophy tells you to do, to be of service to mankind, be of service, meditate, read the esoteric classics. These are three energies, and these three energies activate three chakras in the head: the throat, the eye, and the crown chakra, Sahasrara. The crowning glory of man, we say. And when we do that, we begin to be able to interpret our dreams. We begin to see meaning in the outer world, and it has a symbolic meaning, and we find ourselves living in both worlds more. And I've gone through periods in my life where it was almost impossible for me to distinguish between the dream world and the real world, because it all had meaning, and I saw the meaning of it. And so I saw the meaning in this. Hosanna. As fate would have it, an artist, an architect, has proposed that the rebuilding of the Notre Dame Cathedral should have glass roof and spires. And that was exactly what I had intuited on April 15th. And so this is what they're proposing. And it's a splendid idea because it's the merging of the new with the old. And it's involved with light, and light is fire, and it lets the sunlight into the church, which it didn't before. It only came in through the rose windows. I had my boy got married, and he was married out north of Rochester in a Swedenborgian church. Anybody know about the Swedenborgian? Yeah. He was married, and when you were sitting in the church, it was all glass. And it was like you were in the woods. It was surrounded by a wood, by a forest of trees, and beautiful. And I was mesmerized by this Swedenborgian church. There's something very important in the life's work of Emanuel Swedenborg, and the Swedenborgians see him as a modern-day Christ. I believe he was. But anyway, this was the proposal of a glass roof and spire which would function as a greenhouse. Here it is. Look at that. Look at that. So there it is. There's the similar, a little different than what I had envisioned, but it's there. I can't make this stuff up. That's it. And here in the spire area, up on the higher level, they planted trees. What a beautiful concept. One of the things that a very high initiate being teacher of mine said that in the new age, in this coming new age, that there would be new religions, and that they would be religions of orientation. And what does that mean, orientation? Well, it means your orientation to the divine. What is that? And it's revealed in the horoscope. It's revealed in ray analysis, which we'll talk about. And we're going to pass out pamphlets that give detailed explanations into the rays. We have a chart over here from a magazine that I helped Dr. Baker publish in England called Inscape Magazine. And it explains the rays and the entire proposition that from this one source, from the one being, come this trinity. And out of the trinity of really the first, second, and third ray, the ray of will, the ray of love, wisdom, and the ray of active intelligence, come four more rays of aspect and rays of attribute. And that symbolically in the Bible, we call them Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, this Trinity, and that God, as human beings, we cannot totally understand the one, we can understand the three. And in this way, we can approach God. But here is a beautiful concept for this reconstruction of the cathedral, and it may leave with these trees. There would be another religion, which would be a religion that would be based on nature. And you think how powerfully people are looking at nature. And what was it I read both in China and India that they had planted, in a year they had planted millions, both in India and China, millions of trees, which is significant. We'll talk about that and the implication of the enrichment of the oxygen-nitrogen cycle of the earth that will come about through free energy. But that's later in the lecture. But you can see how beautiful that is. And here is the glass pyramid of I.M. Pei, a famous Oriental architect. And that was exactly what I had envisioned. I used this symbol of this, thinking they will build this glass roof and spire based on the style of architecture of I.M. Pei. Fabulous, fabulous architect. Lo and behold, I.M. Pei died yesterday, 102 years old. Now, we say that there are no coincidences where the divine law is concerned. This is a significant event. It has some meaning about the future, about his influence, and about my vision. But that's I.M. Pei, and he died May 16th, 102 years old. Extraordinary man. Worth thinking about. We say that in the esoteric, we were always encouraged by a powerful teacher to brood and ponder. Think. Start thinking. Most of us don't really think. The picture of the old lady on the wall back there, Annie Besant, said that most people had 16-inch vision. You've heard me talk about this before. And she used to take the students when they came to her, and she would say, now you go in the back room there and you sit there for 20 minutes, and then after 20 minutes is up, you come out and come back and see me. So they would go sit in the back room, and the 20 minutes would expire, and they would come out, and she would say, now you were in there for 20 minutes. Yes. What color were the drapes in the room? I don't know. How many chairs were in the room? What color was the carpeting? I don't know. How many windows were in that room? I don't know. And that's how aware most of us are. We suffer from 16-inch vision. This is what we see. We see 16-inch vision. We need to change that for a multitude of very good reasons. I'm always amazed when I go to the grocery store and I go down an aisle and here's somebody, someone, trying not to say somebody because we're body-oriented, so I'm trying to say someone or everyone instead of everybody. And here's someone with their grocery cart in the aisle sideways, and you can't get through. And of course, the aisles in the grocery stores, if you haven't noticed, are getting narrower, and they've got and you can't fault them. And the reason they do that is because in the chaos of grocery shopping and 100 people in the store, they have found a spot of sanctity and solitude, which is lacking in their lives because they don't meditate. And they're constantly bombarded. One of the masters were asked years ago, the Theosophical Society, what is lacking most in everyone's life? And you know what they said? Silence. Silence is lacking. We always say, if you can't meditate, sit in silence. Silence disseminates the soul. People are always trying to figure out, Jim, am I meditating properly? And what about this meditation? And transcendental meditation. All meditation is transcendental. What happens in meditation, if you really distill it and boil it down, is you have stopped becoming a transmitter and you are now a receiver. I was home one night after I'd gotten divorced 20 years ago this month. I was meditating. And the telephone rang. And I answered the phone, and the voice on the phone said, "Is this David Zimmerman?" I said, "Yeah." "I have a man here who wants to talk to you." It's okay. And the man on the other end of the line, he was a black man. I don't remember his name right now, it escapes me, but it was like a Muslim name, Mustafa or somebody. He was in a federal prison in Ashland, Kentucky. And he was crying out, spiritually crying out to me. He wanted books to read. And of course I have books published by Dr. Baker, hundreds of books. Wanted me to send him some books to prison. And so I did. And I had told Dr. Baker about my experience of this man in prison who had wanted these books. And he said, when you were married, you were in prison. And he said, your imprisonment objectified itself in the outer world through a man who was in prison, who really was in a prison. And your esoteric nature brought about this event in your life. It was activated. It was brought out in your life. It was a coincidence of experience, and it's a powerful event, and it has a powerful meaning. It's worth thinking about. Interestingly enough, Rudolf Steiner, how many know the name Rudolf Steiner? Many of you. Rudolf Steiner was aware of the occult prophecy that said that when great temples are consumed by fire, avatars are born into the world. He knew that. He had been a theosophist and then created an organization called Anthroposophy. Similar but a little different. There were reasons why he did it. I don't want to go into that tonight. But he built this school out of wood, and it was built without hammers and nails. And they were interlocking pieces. And he knew as he built that school that it would be consumed by fire devas, angelic, what we call in the esoteric, you have to read the books, fire devas, that would at an appropriate time consume that school and burn it to ashes. And he knew that. They always blamed the Nazis, but the Nazis didn't do it. Steiner himself played an important role. At least a fifth-degree initiate, we can say, of Rudolf Steiner, a master. His writings are extraordinary. He gave us glimpses of things that are only now coming into fruition. One of the things that he said, and I discuss it frequently. He said 100 years ago that the great mass mental illness of America would be hysteria. The mania of America in the 21st century would be hysteria. It's hard to watch television without some hysteria of entertainers or sporting events or politicians who excite hysteria and the mass mania, which is hysteria. The hysteria has an equal and opposite counterpart. And the hysteria for turns to a hatred against. You're going to see a lot of that in the coming weeks. But anyway, he built this magnificent school only to fulfill the prophecy. There it is. There's almost nothing left. Said the Nazis, burn it. They didn't. And then he built it. He built it out of reinforced concrete, ferrule cement, which is stronger than steel. They make manhole covers in Europe out of ferrule cement. Lightweight, super strong. Goetheanum version number 2. And it'll be a center. It'll be a center in the coming New Age. And one of the things that's interesting about where this is built, it's built on farmland that used to belong to the great prince of physicians, Paracelsus, the most powerful mystic in Europe at that time, Paracelsus, who really gave us the foundational teachings for today in what we call esoteric healing and using herbs. It was Paracelsus, who was bombastic, and he had a first-rate personality, and he had a first-rate soul. And he would go into a rage, and he would tell the teachers and the academicians of the schools in Europe that they were fools and didn't know what the hell they were doing, and told them how to heal people. And when he was on the battlefields of Europe at the time, he healed both sides, both armies. He didn't differentiate. A highly evolved initiate being. But these temples, as they're burned, it takes us back to the time of the burning of the temple of, in 356 A.D., the Temple of Artemis. And when that temple was consumed by fire, guess who was born the very night? It was Alexander the Great. And we don't think of him in esoteric terms, but we should. We should think of him in esoteric terms. Because he did something. He brought Greek, he was Macedonian, but Greek, same thing, really. Western ideas into the East. He influenced a large part of the world. And he was a young man when he died. He was what, 26, 27, something like that. But he did this tremendous thing with an army of men and their campaigns, and he had a benevolence about him. Even as a conqueror, he was benevolent to the families of the kings and the armies that they had defeated. Extraordinary to do that. But the Temple of Artemis was consumed by fire. And then the Gertianum was consumed by fire. And now Notre Dame was consumed by fire. And these are significant events that we can't minimize these things. But it's interesting, as I said, this structure now virtually indestructible, certainly from fire, built on the land that once was owned by Paracelsus. I give meaning to that. I'm a guy who sees meaning in things, deep meaning. I've had many dreams and many experiences. I saw the World Trade Towers weeks before they collapsed. I saw them destroyed and collapsed, pancaked in on themselves. And then the morning of the September 11th, 2001, I was out of body and had astrally projected over the southern tip of Manhattan. And I saw, from a height of about a mile or a mile and a half, I saw what I thought at first were two tornado clouds coming up from the tip of southern tip of Manhattan. And as I zoomed in with my astral vision, because I'm in my astral body, but I'm aware, I have continuity of consciousness, I'm able to interpret that plume, those two plumes of destruction, they weren't tornadoes. And this feeling of dread, I even said in my dream vision, this is a feeling of dread and something really terrible has happened. Sometimes we experience these types of things. Mary Jo, our president here at the lodge, had asked me as a favor to talk about these rays, and we have some handouts, and we see that their significance is vast, and what the rays do, the rays are in all things, they influence all of nature. They influence color. Certain colors fall under certain rays, and this chart will tell you what rays and what colors correspond. Bailey talked about correspondences, and this was one of the things that she meant. Zodiacal signs, planets, food types, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, they all fall under certain rays, certain energies. We live in a septenary solar system where things are based on numbers of seven chakras, 7 rays. Many things fall into categories of 7. The gases, the senses, 7 senses: sight, intuition, hearing, taste, concrete touch, pain, smell, the ability to smell, 7 senses. The planes, adi, the atmic, logoic, the mental plane, the buddhic plane, the monastic plane, the astral plane, the etheric physical plane. The rays of the nations. America is a nation that has a 2nd ray soul and a 6th ray personality, and the masters have warned us that because of that, America is prone to socialism. They don't want it. America is a democracy and a beacon of light for the rest of the world. And socialism has failed every place in the world it's been tried. So, and is failing. The nervous system, the endocrine glands, the nation's souls, the nation's personalities, shapes, chakras, and the kingdoms in nature. You have one? All right. You hand those out. You can glance through those, and we'll give you a couple of minutes, but I'll continue to explain something here of this chart. Might be a good thing for me to talk about now is we're handing these out. They explain the rays and how they're manifesting themselves in nature. This will be the basis of the new psychology, which will be an exact science. Psychology, as we practice it nowadays, is not an exact science. In fact, it's very inexact. And this will help enlighten us. And we say that the proposition that all things are the result of a single emission, Big Bang, the Big Bang theory. And out of this explosion, which in reality was an initiatory experience of the one being, that's what it was. I had an experience where I had traveled back billions of years in the aura of an immense being who took me to the experience known as Big Bang. And this master being teacher, a Christ-like, Buddha-like being, explained to me at the event of Big Bang what it was all about and how it was in fact an initiatory experience of enlightenment of this one being had taken an immense initiation. Alice Bailey says in the extract, Dwal Kul, her Tibetan teacher, said that we are all aspirants. We're all disciples, from the humblest aspirant up to and beyond the Christ himself. So that means that there are beings higher than Christ in the universe, because there are beings who ensoul the sun. There are beings who ensoul the solar system. There are beings of consciousness who ensoul the constellations and supply those energies to us that are the foundation of astrology. It's worth thinking about. So the Big Bang Theory and the origin of the universe is merely a rephrasing of the more ancient proposition. Carl Jung believed that every thought, word, and deed is affected by energies entering the psyche from the hidden radiatory center within from our unconscious. The religions also describe the deity as a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. The three aspects of the divine, Plato proposed that the divine cannot be perceived directly, and it can't. It cannot be perceived directly, but manifest in man as the qualities of truth, beauty, and goodness. Fill your life with truth, beauty, and goodness. And so the one may be known through the three. I said something similar earlier about that. The next expression of the divine emission is sevenfold. The three become seven. It was in the secret doctrine, back there on the bookcase in the back, the great magnum opus of our founder, Madame Blavatsky, Russian mystic, powerful woman. The secret doctrine that the idea was put forward that all things and beings in the world and all forms of mind and matter arose from combinations of seven fundamental energies. That's what we're talking about. These energies of those rays influence everything on this planet. They influence your personality. They influence your soul. They influence your mental body, your mental equipment. They influence your astral or emotional body. Your physical body will fall into one of these ray categories. There are seven great beings, the Lord of the seven rays, archetypal intelligences. Carl Jung talked about archetypes. I'm going to give a lecture next month on the archetypes of Japan. And the Fukushima event of mass destruction and how the consciousness of the Japanese people created this monster called Godzilla from deep within their own psyche. It was a product of an atomic war, of an atomic bomb, and it created this creepy monster-like figure. And we see pictures from Fukushima of flowers that are so deformed and distorted, it's unimaginable that anything like that could even exist. I remember pictures of daisies that had grown inward together. Just bizarre stuff. And we'll have those images will be available in this lecture. And that they're also, the Japanese people have an immense karma. And the karma was from, they're a sub-race of the fourth root race, and their karma was a violent karma. And the powerful mystics who, initiative teachers who I've had contact with say that if this Fukushima, it's probably too late, cannot be controlled, the Japanese government is not telling the people how bad it is, half of the island of Japan will have to be evacuated. And they will lease land from the Australians in the center of the continent where nobody lives or almost no one. And like Africa, all the people live around the perimeter of the continent. Australia is the same way. But these are things into the future. This isn't going to happen next week. You might not see it in your lifetime. I'm sorry that the young kids aren't here tonight because the young kids here in the lodge should be here. They should be here to hear this lecture because they'll be involved, they'll witness it. There are seven great beings, the lords of the seven rays, archetypal intelligences that transform the divine qualities into seven, much as a prism refracts white light into the seven colors of the spectrum. So we're beginning to see that there's some very interesting thing that happens with light and color and the rays. We say that they are extra systemic. These ray energies come from beyond our solar system. They influence our galaxy. The energies come from the galaxy to the solar system. From our solar system, these ray energies find astrological and zodiacal correspondences that Alice Bailey talked about correspondences. The sacred seven planets and the seven spirits before the throne. We hear that in Christianity and in Judaism. The Bible refers to the 7 spirits before the throne of God. The Judaic religion embraces this proposition in the 7 Sephiroth of the Kabbalah. They're talking about the 7 rays. And it's going to be the foundation of a psychology that I've been talking about for 30 years. And there's one of the books that explains it. And how you can do, if you're a psychologist, you can do a ray analysis. Here's my friend Jeff. He has a 2nd ray soul. And he's got a 3rd ray physical body. And here's the 3rd ray physical body, the mesomorphic body that has already been identified by psychology. So this is important stuff I'm telling you. And you need to be aware of it. The next level of divine expression is in the zodiac of the 12 signs. The 7 become 12. The 12 signs absorb the divine attributes of the 7 rays and express them with their own particular qualities. Then there are the 12 planets which rule the signs of the zodiac. And finally, the 12 houses of the horoscope. That's why astrology, the new astrology, what I practice, the Clairgate method, the esoteric astrology, is powerful stuff. And the things that you can extract from that astrology are just overwhelming. There's not a day of my life that I'm not amazed by the things that I pull out of people's horoscopes. It's almost frightening in a way. It's powerful. It's big medicine, as the Indians used to say. It's big medicine. It is big medicine. As the earth and the planets interact with the signs in the great celestial dance through the houses, we are continually presented with the permutations of the divine qualities. I'll explain permutations. The music of the spheres and all of these forces are affecting our spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical forms. The manifest world is a precipitation of astrological energies expressing divine ideas. I always use the old analogy from my own horoscope with the ascendant in Libra. I know I've told you this before, but it's important. When you look at those zodiacal sign, a person who is a trained astrologer, he can put that into words. They make sentences. Baker wrote a 3-volume dictionary of astrology where he didn't sleep for 7 years. He had continuity of consciousness. And he used his astral brain, and he took the 500,000 words of the Oxford Dictionary, 500,000 words of the Oxford Dictionary, the English language, and he applied astrological aspects for each word. You think the secret doctrine is big stuff? Try that. Strap that on for size. It works. So here is the sign of Libra, and one of the signs, and I was with somebody the other day, and we were watching TV, and there was the ocean, and here was the sun rising up out of the Libra. You say Libra, I say Libra. It's the English influence in my life. But it's George Washington's hat, isn't it? It's Napoleon's hat. It's a general. It's also the morphology, morphing the symbol. The symbol is morphing. It's an automobile. And that's the wheel opening on an automobile. And here's the Libran feature in the profile of the automobile. And what did that mean in my horoscope with Neptune? It meant that I designed automobiles for General Motors. That doesn't mean that for everybody, but there's thousands of meanings. And what the astrologer does, who understands the rays and who really understands esoteric astrology, he gives meaning, a higher meaning, higher manas. This is the highest manas that is available to mankind at this time, is in the new astrology, and it in part is the salvation of mankind because it tells you what your soul's purpose is. That is big medicine. That is powerful stuff. So I hope Mary Jo gets to see this video. She wanted me to talk about the rays. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them as we progress. The rays, as you can see, have colors, and if you look at your sheet, it will tell you which ray is which color. And one of the rays is, the first ray, is the color red. And the color red was a color that Blavatsky used to wear. Not too many people know this, but she would wear a red skirt and a white blouse. And she'd have a big hat, one of those plumed hats, and she'd cock it on her head at a certain angle, and it was a stunning and powerful sight to see her in that attire. But you have the charts that we've hand out that are in the back of this book. Here they are. There's the charts for the rays of the nations, the rays of gases, the souls of the nations. Here's the percentages of the people on the planet who have those rays. Did we pass that out? Yeah. We did. Okay. So you can look at that, and some weekend, with the blessings of the lodge, I'll give a weekend seminar on the 7 rays in esoteric psychology, and I will teach you how to do ray analysis. Powerful stuff. And if you're a healer, I used to get a lot of doctors that would come to my lectures. Are there any doctors in the house tonight? Yeah, Tracy, of course. Yeah. A Claire Gates student. Friend, supporter. So we have those considerations to make. And then here again is the correspondences of the rays, one of the sheets. These are showing the percentages of the rays with the zodiacal signs. I think there's some measure of that on one of the charts. Here's explaining the virtues and the vices of the rays. First ray people. Courage, steadfastness, truthfulness, fearlessness, trustworthiness, large-minded. The vices are ruthless, hard, cold, prideful, arrogant, ambitious, tyrannical, and cruel. The masters have long wanted for America to have a president with a first-ray soul and a first-ray personality. You have to be strong in the world because America, and again we're into abstruse ideas, but they're given out in Theosophy and the writings of Blavatsky inferred the rays. It wasn't her job to give it out in detail. Alice Bailey began to do that, and then Baker, of course, elucidated it really even further than what Alice Bailey did. But in the world that we live in, as we're evolving, America holds an important place within the ranks of the 5th root race. The 5th root race is the Aryan race, and we don't mean that in the terms that Adolf Hitler talked about, although I have a lecture on Adolf Hitler and the esoteric significance of World War II, in which I explain the esoteric forces behind World War I and World War II. It's a beautiful PowerPoint, and I've given it at other colleges before. I'd like to give it here sometime. Very esoteric, very abstruse, and very relevant to the world today. So these are the rays, and it explains the virtues and vices. And on one of your charts, a chart of the psychology of the rays, it explains the types. The first ray soul, the first ray astral body, the first ray mental body, the first ray personality, the first ray physical body, all the way down ray 2, ray 3, ray 4, ray 5, 6, and 7. So you can kind of, if you can be truthful with yourself, you might want to make some copies of this when you go home, and you can do a self-analysis of your ray types, what you think your body might be, what you think your mental body might be, what your astral body is. Your astral body, I always use the example of a six-ray astral body, is a person who will tear up easily and watching a sad movie. That sixth-ray body needs to be changed and morphed into a second-ray astral body, which is less emotional. We see our strengths and weaknesses through these rays and through the astrology, through esoteric astrology and through the horoscope. As we look at that great wheel of the 12 houses, it's telling us strengths and weaknesses that are in that horoscope. So that's a taste of the rays that I promised Mary Jo I would give. The prophecies of both Alice Bailey and of C.W. Leadbeater was that we are beginning to approach, although it doesn't seem like it, but some of us see it, a new renaissance in the world, which probably firstly, I believe, will manifest itself in Europe. And one of the ways it will manifest itself will be decentralized city-state government. The real problem that we have in America with our democracy is that it needs to be decentralized. It's too centralized. They got too much power down there and they abuse it. You'll become more and more aware of that in the next 2 weeks. Healing with light, sound, and color is a powerful thing, and you're going to see more and more of it. Many of us are using it. I have books at home written by a medical doctor friend of mine who is a prolific author of esoteric books on esoteric healing. And it's a powerful thing. We talked about a little bit earlier about friends of mine who had healed themselves miraculously from cancer and had been given really not good diagnosis by the doctors. But there'll be new cities will be built. They're already being built in China. They go out and they take a giant piece of land and they build a city from the ground up. A whole new city that will occupy millions of people. So all the infrastructure is in place. You can imagine Manhattan when it was a swamp. It had streams and lakes and log cabins, rocks and boulders from the Ice Age. And they built little shanties, and then they built houses, and the streets meander in all directions. And not so in the New Age. In the New Age, those things will all be planned. Building the subway system after the fact. But in China, it's built with consideration in the very beginning. Cities in the very far future will be built in the sky. And one of the reasons they will be built in the sky, they'll have new forms of architecture, new materials, and they will realize the significance of prana and etheric energy. And they will be building cities where there will be more etheric energy and closer to the sun and the prana emanating from within. I know it sounds way out, but we're living in the age of science fiction. I can take my little iPhone here, and if somebody would have told me 20 years ago when I was lecturing that I could have this lecture on my phone, who would believe that? Not a one of you here would believe that. Dick Tracy and remember his watch? And so I go to the Verizon store the other day because my phone screwed up again, and some young lady is helping me, and she said, "Oh, come here, I want to show you something." And she wanted to sell me one of these watches that's got my iPhone now in a watch. See, it's this big. I may get one. We'll see. But anyway, new cities, decentralized, going back to the city-state government, which is what the Renaissance was founded on. The great Renaissance of Europe and the guild system and the city-state governments. Go to Florence, Italy, and check it out, Venice, and see these incredible old city-states. And they'll be renewed, and it will spread throughout the world. One of the things that the great Theosophical clairvoyant C.W. Leadbeater said was he talked about the Anglo-Saxonification of Europe, meaning that the influence of America on Europe will take place. They may have within these city-states governments more closely aligned to our own, but decentralized, city-state, policies, other things that come from America, hopefully the good things, and they will be if the prophecies are correct. So a great and bright future lies ahead of us. This is an interesting picture here that we put in. We have seen what we thought was unseeable, said Shepard Dolman, director of the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration. We have seen and taken a picture of a black hole. One of the great mysteries of science is the black hole. What is dark energy? And what is dark matter? What is it really? And Einstein made a significant comment about it. He didn't say he was referring to it, but he gave us a clue. If you read The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky gives us clues. She tells us things in there that is the old saying, I've lost my glasses, and now I need my glasses to find my glasses. And so if you can read between the lines of what Einstein said when he said that as man's consciousness expands, the universe expands, he was talking about mental energy. And dark energy is mental energy. And dark matter is emotional matter. We're emanating minute atoms of energy that are million times smaller than the hydrogen atom. If we took all of the stars in the universe and we were able to put them at equidistance to the earth, the entire sky would be a blaze of light. It would look like the sun magnified from horizon to horizon. It's an interesting thought. But the dark hole has captivated mankind at this time. Some people say we're living in a dark hole, that our universe is inside of a dark hole. I don't know about that, but I can tell you something about the event horizon. This is not a real good picture of the event horizon. It's a little fuzzy, doesn't have the detail. But if you see the outer ring of the black hole, you'll see a thin bead of light around it. And what the event horizon is portraying, is telling us, is it's where this matter, the solid matter in the event horizon is dematerializing and is being sucked into the black hole. New architecture, we talked about it earlier. This is Sid Mead. Sid Mead was a car designer at Ford Motor Company. And I worked at General Motors, and so we had guys like Sid Mead were rampant in the building. And he was a guy who liked futuristic renderings. He'd do these paintings of the future, futuristic cars. And now it's happening, driverless cars and electric cars and hydrogen cars. And a lot of times the artist will have the vision. They'll have the vision before it actually, exteriorizes itself in the world. It's part of the creative process. Crop circles. Alice Bailey and a rendering or a painting of a Davic, an angelic being of nature. That's what's making these crop circles. The prophecies say, Blavatsky, Alice Bailey talked about it, of these Davic forces are soon to materialize in the world. And they will help us. They will help us heal, and they will help us restore the health of the planet. They will neutralize the radioactivity of the trash piles of spent nuclear rods from nuclear plants. Hopefully they'll be able to help the Japanese people and neutralize Fukushima. I don't know how far into the future that may be. It may be too late. I don't know. But they're telling us that they're coming, and they're creating these beautiful patterns throughout Europe. But it's interesting because it seems to be the center of their attention is in England, which has a very esoteric meaning to me as a student of anthropogenesis, and understanding the influence of the evolution of the races, of the Aryan race, of which there are 7 sub-races. We're the 5th. There are 2 more to come, and then we'll enter into the period of the time of the 6th root race. Already the 6th root race is beginning to emerge in the world. And many believe, as I believe, it's in Western Australia, which is kind of isolated really from Perth, the rest of Australia. But that's the way it was with England, because it was an island country. And there was where the Anglo-Saxon subrace flourished. And that was the 5th subrace that was in war with Adolf Hitler. You have to hear my lecture on Adolf Hitler and the esoteric significance of World War II and its relationship to the subraces of the 5th root race, the Germanic and the Anglo-Saxon. So it's important stuff. Anyway, I wanted to put that up with you. There are a lot of people that are fascinated by that stuff and give lectures on it but can't explain it. So I'm explaining to you what it is. In forces that are now invisible that will soon exteriorize. And one of the thoughts that I was told to consider by my teacher was, when these angelic beings finally fully materialize into a physical body, how do you protect them from people who have never seen anything like that before and want to kill them? You have to think about that. How are you going to protect these magnificent spiritual beings who are here for your well-being? Some guy with a shotgun will be out there shooting at him. One of the great mysteries that we need to concern ourselves with is the Cern Collider, and where the Cern Collider shoots these atoms around this 50-mile circle, 17,000 times a second or something, at unbelievable speeds. And one of the things that will come out of this, they talk about Higgs boson, the mystery of the Cern Collider. One of the things that will come out of this will be energy sources, new energy sources, a form of alchemy where atoms will be able to collide with one another, where atoms of silver, atoms of copper that equal the atomic weight of gold will collide, and they'll make gold. They'll make gold. It's worth thinking about. Nikola Tesla and his microwave towers of energy. This is kind of a renewed version. I had an interesting story about the tower that Tesla had built out on Long Island. And the guy that was my best buddy in Vietnam lived about 2 blocks from it, and I never knew that. And so I was out on Long Island one weekend, and And he said, and the street is named Tesla Street. And he said, hey, let's go down to Tesla's, where his tower was. And what the hell's he talking about? So we walked down the street, and there it was. The tower wasn't there, but it was Tesla Street, and it was the land and the laboratory where one of the laboratories that Nikola Tesla had. And he said, what did Tesla tell us? He said, the sign in the window says, if you want to understand the mysteries of the universe, you have to think in terms of energy, vibration. What was the other one? You have to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's what the rays do for us. They're about energies. They're about frequencies. They're about vibration. So we've drawn a correlation there that is important. The space elevator. I gave a lecture on this to an astonished crowd at a university one time. And one of the things that will happen, we're living in the age of science fiction, is that we will be able to colonize the moon. And if you've read The Secret Doctrine, which if you're a Theosophist, a member of the Theosophical Society, you should read. And the teachings in the writings of Blavatsky say that before human beings appeared on Earth, there was an emerging evolution that was taking place on the moon. This is very esoteric stuff. I'm an esoteric guy. And I read the books. And I have had experiences that confirm many of these things that I'm telling you tonight. That life, only in the astral form, was attempting to evolve on the moon. It is said in the teachings, it's not Zimmerman. Zimmerman doesn't make this stuff up. I don't invent this. I'm nobody. I'm a guy who was a little red-headed kid in Indiana, grew up in a little tiny town of 2,000 people, if that. A little farm town. But I could remember dying by the age of 3. I knew that I had lived before. I didn't know the word reincarnation. And what it did was it excited within me an interest in the unexplained. And I have it to this day. And so the moon, in the early days of the Earth's evolution, the moon was very close to the Earth. And it was said that if you stood on the surface of the Earth, the shape of the moon extended from horizon to horizon. That's how close the moon was. It's moving away an inch a year or whatever it is. Science knows that. We can measure that. And that the moon, when it was close to the Earth, it acted as a mother shielding its child from harm. It was a shield that protected the Earth from cosmic bombardment. Read The Secret Doctrine. She explains it all in The Secret Doctrine. And then the moon itself, through a cosmic accident, was really destroyed. And the surface was blown away. But there were species that were in astral form that eventually those creatures, marsupials, kangaroos, who, like man on the moon, can jump 30 feet. Astronauts can jump 30 feet because the gravity is almost non-existent. So too can a kangaroo on Earth jump tremendous distances. And animals that had pouches, think of the animals of the world that are pouch-bearing animals, and that human beings also had pouches. And that evolution of certain life forms, perhaps not all of them, were brought to the earth when the earth took over the life forms of the moon, which had been destroyed, and now the roles are being reversed. And the earth, which was once the child of the moon, and now the moon is the child of the Mother Earth. And the colonization of the moon, these are immense concepts, but it will happen in the evolution of mankind. And we're beginning to see now the Japanese are very interested in the moon and other civilizations, and they'll colonize the moon. And it may be in the very deepest of our esoteric thoughts and thinking that the most valuable equipment we have is our DNA.